Okay, here we go. We'll call this committee of the whole meeting to order on January 28th, 2025 at 6:02 PM. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we're going to start with item number 4, and we'll come back to public participation. So we'll start with Lori Milosevic, LAR, with Estes Bridgewater and Ogden, and she's going to discuss the fiscal year 23-24 audit presentation. Lori, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. I've got 2 reports.
Lori, before you speak, can you pull the microphone down?
Hold up, down.
Thank you. We want to make sure everybody can hear you.
Can you hear it? Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
We've got the bound report, which is about 97 pages, and then I did prepare a short summary of the 97 pages. So I'll probably just go over this and reference some of the pages in here so you kind of know where to look for things as I go. But basically, the numbers on this came directly from the report. It's just a little easier to go over than flipping through the book. So I'll just start on page 1 of this little report here. And this is the governmental funds, the general fund. It is considered a major fund, and I just summarize the revenues and expenditures for the year. And you can see off the bat, revenues, both revenues and expenditures were pretty similar to the prior year. We do show comparatives, so you can kind of see the total revenues compared to the prior year. We were not off a whole lot from either year. You can see at the end, net change in fund balance of $492 for the general fund, and then last year was $821. So both years you've increased your fund balance, which is always good because general fund usually gets hit with a lot of unanticipated expenses typically. So overall, taxes, everything was pretty in line with the prior year. Not a whole lot of variances there. So good report for the general fund. On the next page, we show the motor fuel tax fund. And again, these are taxes collected specifically for motor fuel use. This is the first year that we did not have Rebuild Illinois. So you'll notice in that first revenue line item, 718 last year. The current year was 583, so part of that is those Rebuild Illinois funds that were collected that need to be expended, I believe, probably by the end of this year, more than likely. So motor fuel taxes are to be used for those road projects throughout the year and nothing else. So they are restricted for that particular use. So you did have an overall change in fund balance of a negative 15,000. The next fund at the bottom of the page is ARPA funds, and what you took in, you budgeted and expended. So you received about 690 in ARPA funds, and you spent the same. So that fund only has about 6,500 left in it, which is good. You're spending it as you're getting it, because I think that ends probably next year. Yeah. So was that your last? Did you get more funds? No, so you're done, basically.
Last tranche, yep.
Yep, good. I see a lot of people kind of waiting to spend it, so you guys did the right thing by spending it. The next page, we show your non-major funds. Those consist of about 5 different funds. You can see those on page 92 with a little bit more detail. And again, your total revenues, 811 for 2024 and 711 for 23. You expended about 1.8 million in the prior year, 1.4, but we did have some capital outlay, about 640,000 in there. And so overall, you had a net change in fund balance of a negative 313,000. And whatever is in capital outlay does get capitalized, and we do depreciate those items. Okay, at the bottom of the page, we show your governmental activities. this is the combined for all funds. And it, if you want to look on page, it's the first schedule in the book. On page 8 of the report, it shows your total governmental activities. So that's all your general funds, your ARPA, motor fuel tax, and those non-major. It's a combination of all those funds together. So again, I just did a summary of it, but your total assets, 46 million. And that we do capitalize all those assets and depreciate, so that does account for that balance of 21 million for your capital assets and your current assets of 12. Under liabilities, those include your any loans, notes, and bonds. Page 32 will give you a quick summary of all your debt for governmental funds and the enterprise funds. Kind of gives you a good little schedule that shows each loan and the maturity value of it at the end of the year. And then at the bottom of your liabilities, of course, is the net pension liabilities those are calculated by IMRF. And for fire and police, we have 2 different actuarial groups that calculate those each year. They provide the calculations and we report it. So on those schedules for IMRF funds, police and fire, run on pages 43 through 71. A lot of information in there. There's a lot of schedules that shows you your assets available for the liability. It shows you detail on the plans, how many members. So there's a lot of additional information in the notes related to the net pension liabilities. If you want a little light reading before you go to bed, that would be where to go. And it is, they do provide all the calculations. We just kind of summarize it in the report, come up with the liability. This year, I don't think there was, seems like every year they tweak it, but with the market values up, yeah, I think investment income was up, contributions were up, so I think the funds look a lot better than they have in the past. They tend to calculate things and make changes that we don't understand, but we just basically report it as they present it. So, but I think overall the pension funds did very well over the last year. Okay, the next schedule we present on the next page is your sewer fund, and we do show the balance sheet for it. Total assets of 33 million compared to the prior year, about 34. We had liabilities of 16, which includes your the IEPA loans. You have 2 of those and some bonds, and those are being paid off. And then your net position, so you can see the breakdown between what is held in capital assets for the sewer fund and those restricted for debt service, and then the unrestricted portion. And then at the bottom of that page, we do show the operating revenues and expenses for both years. And again, pretty comparable for both years. You had operating income of $652,000, in the prior year $980,000. And I always like to report, show that depreciation up there, $1.1 million, is a non-cash expenditure. It's something we calculate each year based on the use of the sewer plant and all the equipment related to running it. So if you kind of look at it that way, it's calculated each year through an adjustment, but it doesn't, you don't expend cash for it. So a total change in net position of $421,000, and the prior year $685,000. So pretty comparable years. And then the last schedule we show are the police and fire pension trust funds. And again, these are investments are managed. The calculations for the liabilities are taken care of by the group. So this is basically us reporting their numbers. Total assets is 16 million. Prior year was about 15.9. We had a small amount of liabilities. And then at the bottom, we do show your breakdown between the contributions realized and unrealized gains. And you could see a big difference between 24 and 23. You had realized and unrealized gains of 1.1 million in the prior year, a negative 324. So the value of those really jumped from year to year, which is what we like to see. And then your deductions include benefits and refunds and administrative expenses. So you did increase the fund by 444,000, and if you look at the prior year, it was a negative 744. So I think each fund did its job, and I think through budgeting, you're not obviously over expending. So overall, I think it's a good report. As far as the audit went, all the books and records are ready and available. They do, there's a lot of stuff to keep track of. They do a great job keeping track of it. Anything we requested was provided. We bug them for a while and it gets done, but there is a lot of information that they track, and they do a real good job. And you also have good segregation of duties too, I think, between what the clerk's office does, what Chuck does, and what the council does. I think there's a lot of eyes looking at everything. So I don't have any recommendations for any changes in that area. So, but yeah, overall, a good, clean report.
It's good news.
Yep.
Is there any questions for Lori? Okay.
Okay. I do have one other thing to mention, which I had already disclosed to Peggy and Chuck. Unfortunately, the firm Estes Bridgewater and Ogden closed down. We've been around for 105 years. I've been there 35 of it, but just couldn't find help. It was kind of one of those, I think every industry's been hit, but public accounting has definitely been hit. You just can't find anybody to work. So what we did, we had 4 partners. Each partner kind of took their share of the business. I opened up my own accounting and audit firm. Somebody opened up their own tax, and we just kind of, it was easier to manage in smaller pieces than try to keep the firm going, kind of hoping you can hire somebody, which wasn't going to happen. So I told them that I, would be available if the council so chooses. I've been doing this for a while. I've been auditing for 35 years, so I told them it'd probably look a little different how I would approach it, but it would still get done. So, but that would be up to the council.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but
Yeah.
happy to see that you'll still be around.
Yeah. No, I told, I've got a lot of clients. I've been doing it a long time, so I couldn't leave them high and dry. So I said, a good 5-6 years. I've kind of given everybody a warning. As years go by, you need to find somebody else. But,
Right.
I'm for sure a good 4 years. But, and hopefully by then, the audit, firms, because it's everywhere, firms are having trouble. So hopefully that'll open up, next couple of years as practices get to hire people and build their staff, because every firm in Springfield's the same way. But yeah, so they can contact me if you want to go forward.
Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mayor. I will say that Ms. Milosevic and her entire firm have been outstanding to work with over the, I don't know how many years now this has been. It's been a lot.
Been a while.
They've been very good and very prompt with everything, and very thorough at explaining things that maybe I don't understand or somebody else doesn't understand the first time around. They've done a very nice job of that too. Just to pick up on what you just heard about the firms in Springfield and being a shortage of auditors, it's not only in the Springfield area, it's a statewide problem, because I get these emails through the Illinois Municipal Treasurers Association, and whether you're in the Chicago suburbs or you're down in the 7 counties at the southern end of the state, anywhere in between, I get these emails from municipal treasurers in various cities, towns, and villages, and they're all having the same problem as finding good firms to do this work. So I would say we're very fortunate that you're going to be doing this for another 6 years. So.
No. Yeah, it is. It's a problem. So I don't know what they're what's gonna happen, but, hopefully it'll, in a couple years, kind of resolve itself. But till then, I'm still around. Not going anywhere.
Good. Okay.
All right.
If there are no questions, then thank you for.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for all of your work and effort.
Yeah, you
We
bet.
appreciate it. Okay, next up is public participation. I have asked Mr. Glenn to come in. Jared Glenn is the new chairman of the county board. Him and I have had some conversations about the relationships between the city and the county, and I thought that it would be good for him to come in and just introduce himself to the council and speak about his position or anything he'd like to. So, Mr. Glenn, would you like to step forward? If you could come to the desk, please.
Whoops. Desk wasn't built for somebody my size.
Long legs.
So I feel like I'm in the hot seat now. I'm almost testifying before Congress, I suppose. So as Mayor Welch said, he, first of all, thank you for letting me come speak this evening. I was elected chairman of the county board back in December. I've known Tracy for a long time, and he had, after that election took place, he reached out immediately and said, "Hey, we have some work to do between the county and the city." And I said, "Hey, look, I don't disagree with you, and I'm not here to talk about water under the bridge or how we are where we are. I'm here to talk about how we go forward." And I respect the mayor. I respect what the mayor's done, and he and I had coffee the other day, and he said, there's a lot of different things we've talked about on how we can build the bridge and build the relationship to make sure, and I'll use the phrase I use, which is we're all rowing the boat in the same direction, right? And because, our goals are aligned. I have a little bit of a broader reach because we've got Atlanta and Mount Pulaski and New Holland and Middletown, but Lincoln is the county seat and is the largest city in the county, and so we should all be going the same direction, kind of as a baseline. And Mayor Welch said, "Well, why don't you come to the city council meeting?" And I said, "Sure, great. When should I show up?" And he said, "Well, how about Tuesday?" And this was Monday. I said, "Okay, so here we are." So I just wanted to come, introduce myself. I think we're going to look for ways to make sure there's a lot more cross communication between our organizations, so you know what we're doing and we know what you're doing. I know the mayor has given me a few examples of some things in the past where he said, "Boy, I really wish we were in the loop." And some of those took place while I was on the board, admittedly as a member. And I suppose at that point I was naive to think that maybe you guys knew some of what was going on, but it's been brought to my attention now. I sit where I sit. I think we've got a good county board. I think we've got some great members, and I think we're, anxious to make sure that we work together. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Other than that, I look forward to kind of continuing to build that bridge and coming back in front of you in the future, and always being a resource. So if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But if you have any now, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions for Chairman Glenn? Okay.
All right, very good.
Wasn't so bad.
It wasn't so bad. That was an easy confirmation.
Yeah. We're looking forward to working with you.
Yep. I look forward to it, guys.
Have a good night.
Well, I'm
Any-
gonna stay unless you're gonna kick me out.
Please do. Is there anybody else that'd like to speak under public participation this evening? Okay. We do need to place item number 4 on the agenda for next week. So, is everybody okay with the regular agenda or the audit? Okay. Place item number 4 on the regular agenda. Next up is item number 5, request a permit, Lincoln Park District 5K, Saturday, August 23rd, 2025. Everybody had a chance to look at the packet? Any questions? Okay. Place this on the consent agenda? Okay. Moving down to item number 6, 129 South Sangamon Street demolition project. Mr. Woodhull.
Thank you, Mayor. So as many of you know, this project has been going on for a little bit now. I estimate about 95% complete. The building is down. The hole is almost full, up against the foundation of the neighboring property. We still have a breach in that earth there. At this point, we have waterproofed or tuck pointed and then waterproofed that foundation wall. So tonight, I've got a couple items that I wanted to put forward to you for your consideration. First one is an additional, I'll call it foundation shoring. It was an idea I thought of. Basically, it'd be 3 lifts of flowable fill in that gap that you see up against the wall that's not backfilled now. I ran it past the structural engineers, and they agreed that it would be a good thing. I think it'd help us sleep better at night. So if you think about it, that building has been basement for over 100 years, and now we've created earth wall basement. So I was thinking that the lateral pressures that are now there that have never been there might come to fruition and do a little damage. Like I said, the engineers at CMT agreed. I reached out for a bid and got a number back at $20,000. So that was one item. And the second item was I reached out to them about rehabbing that now exposed wall. So that would be, we've got joist pockets open, some breaches as far as tuck pointing goes. There's a couple openings that would be filled in. That would include going up the wall completely, getting it ready for paint and then painting it a brick red color. And that number was $28,700. So the numbers I put here in front of you were the original contract price of $210, the waterproofing, which has been done, $6,000, and then the additional $20,000, $28,700 for those 2 items I just mentioned. And then previously I was able to receive a $109,480 insurance check. So if you were to go forward with those items I mentioned, the project cost went from $210 to $155, $219. So those are, I would call them add-ons. I think it would complete the project in a more appropriate manner. Certainly the foundation part, and then as far as the general public goes, seeing that open wall, I guess, is certainly an eyesore. But as you can tell at this point, we've come a long way with the project. Streets are open, of course, and I would say that just kudos to Jaron Industries. They've been great to work with and really did a good job on this project. So
Alderman Bateman.
So you say one of them's 20 and the other one's 28, so it's a total of 48.
48.7.
I would like to put on next week's agenda a not to exceed 60,000. I know it's only 48, but that is a very old building, and I got a feeling, and Wes is nodding his head, that going up we may find other problems, and I would just soon he address them as he finds them instead of, oh, I'm knocking on the door, that amount of money, I need to go back and ask for more, because this is now used to be interior wall, is now an exposed wall. So if you drive by and look at it, there is a lot of, used to be windows, used to be doors, used to be joist pockets that we need to address. And like I said, as he's going up with a lift, I just soon he'd be able to fix it knowing he's got the money to spend.
And much like the foundation, it's never seen the light of day. So over 100 plus years. So
Yep. Alderwoman O'Donoghue.
So that building was in the process of sale when the fire happened, correct?
actually, ironically, it
Decent.
was papers were being signed the day after the fire
Is
happened.
that still a process that's happening?
No, that went away immediately. However, and I don't want to speak out of turn, but I've had, as recently as last Thursday, I had a very lengthy conversation with someone, to the best of my knowledge, who has made an offer and the offer's been accepted. I've talked with them through what their intentions are, their time frame. I would say in the last several years that I've been dealing with these properties, this is the most promising conversations I've had with the person, contractor. Unfortunately, I don't want to be too cynical about it, but I get in this position quite a bit where, no, I sold it, and this guy's going to really do something, and then I talk to them and then they sell it and so forth. This, like I said, this has been the most promising. I don't want to 100% confirm that, but I do have high hopes on this time. So, and actually, same with the building next door, where I met with another contractor yesterday. So,
Alderman Eimer.
Yeah, my question is, I get what you're saying about the ground and all. Is the building that's left standing, is that a condemned building right now?
it is.
It is condemned. So, wouldn't it be advisable, I could see putting the money into it if it's gonna sell and they're gonna try to save it. Is it savable?
Yes. So when people call us or they want to buy it, and well, I can, it's condemned. That's condemned for habitation. So you're not going to buy it tomorrow and move people in. If you want to buy it and work on it, absolutely. Absolutely. Then you'll just go through the process of, is it safe? Is it safe to habitate at that point? So, that is simply to keep people out. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that would buy anything and put anybody in it immediately. That's just the way it is. So, I don't want to say it's false, but it's a misnomer that it's condemned to never go in. And now, obviously, you can see what the cost we've put into this. People are willing to spend the time and effort on it.
Would it be better, would it be good if we did, could we wait to see if they're gonna buy it and then, cause if nobody buys it and we stick another 40,000 in it, it's gotta come down. You see where I'm,
Well, at the end of the day, we don't own it, of course. I
Right.
think the
building on the other side of it condemned also?
correct, yes, and that's in the same, literally the same boat. And I've been working on them for several years, but in the last 2 weeks, I'd say the wind just pushed the flag the right direction. It's I'll say looking promising. I've had several conversations with the people. I would say that I understand it's no fault of ours, and unfortunately became our problem. But to some degree, we created what you see, I guess. Certainly, the foundation. I think it's necessary, mostly because of the several tons of earth pressure that's,
What kind of time frame would we have if we tried to see if someone was gonna buy it? I mean,
like I said, the conversation I had today, the last email I had was, I would say 2:00, and it was basically, yep, I'm hoping it works out. I've done what I can do, and I look forward to working with you. As soon as I get through this paperwork and escrow stuff, I'll be reaching out with my intentions, timeframes, plans, permitting, all
local
that.
person that's interested?
What's that?
Is it a local person that's interested?
No, one of them is not. But they all do work in this area. So
Alderman Parrott.
So was there discussions on the sale of this contingent to these being done?
no, absolutely not. This was 100%.
Well, then if they're going to sell this building, why would we put? I can see the waterproofing for the foundation, but why would the city pay for another $50,000?
Well, like
Is
I
it-
said,
Yeah, because if it's not,
fortunately we created the potential liability and the obvious blight. I mean, by tearing down the building, again, no fault of ours, but otherwise you've got exposed beam pockets, mortar, brick. It looks bad. First off, it's certainly going to get worse. It's never going to get better.
well, I was just thinking if they purchase it, then they could do one of our grants as well to help with that. How do we know? I mean, are we putting more money into this than they're selling the building for?
The neighboring, yeah, absolutely. I don't know what the numbers are, but I guarantee you it's more than 150 grand, or less than 150 grand, for sure. I mean, these things have been bought and sold so many times, and people, unfortunately, a lot of the people that have in the past, they don't even come look at them. I've dealt with people from Jersey to California and Texas up north they simply see a tax sale thing. Oh, it's a big old building, and big selling point is the Amtrak and this and that. I'll get it for this, and then they see it and go, well, then they just back away. And so, again, this is probably I don't want to shoot myself in the foot, but this is the most positive I've been with these two other buildings.
Yeah.
Also 100,000 under what we budgeted to spend because of the insurance check. And, being in my ward, you drive down there, it currently looks like a building caught fire and it fell down, and now this one's standing there. I think by spending the extra money, at least shoring up the outside of it, it does make it more sellable. We created the problem, and if it makes it more sellable, we would, just like all the other buildings and properties we buy and sell, it goes back on the tax roll. So I just think we should fix it correctly to make it look like an exterior wall, fill in the windows and doors, and I was just trying to, since we're so far under budget, just trying to prevent Mr. Woodhall, if he runs across a issue of having to stop, go to another council meeting and ask for more funds.
Well,
He's asking for the 48.7 plus the 6
The 6 is already in there.
is already in there.
Yeah, so at
It's
this
already
point, we've spent
completed.
106,520, and that's including the negative 109.
Thank you.
yeah.
Another
and you-
thing, we wasn't, I'm sorry, Tracy.
no, go ahead, Mr. Armour.
We wasn't, we didn't create the problem. We was handed the problem.
Correct.
I mean, I know what you're saying. I get it. But I don't, it's a tough road. And then to turn around and stick more money in, I mean, if it sells and somebody fixes it and it turns into something, yes, it was what. But what if we do all this and then the building has to come down? Then we've wasted that money. It's a tough road.
We just bought 3 buildings on Chicago Street in the hopes that they would sell. Thank God they did. We did at next to no dollar amount for them to fix up. I look at this is no different. This is now a blight that we got to deal with. We should put our best foot forward and hope it sells. We literally purchased 2 buildings because one was falling down. So I look at it as we're in the same boat. It looks terrible. If we make the outside look nice, then maybe someone will buy it. And like Wes said, the condemned part is it's condemned for habitation. It's not a condemned building as it's going to fall down any minute. Correct me if I'm wrong, it's just condemned it has apartments in it. It's condemned for humans to live in it. So with some fixing up, even though they do, with some fixing up, then, maybe someone can turn it into some more apartments or a storefront downstairs, apartments upstairs.
Alderwoman Rolfs.
What would be the probability and the possibility if that went down of someone coming in, buying that lot and building a brand new building on it?
Buying the lot that's there now,
Yeah, if that building came down, we'd have another empty lot sitting there, right?
which the building next to the one we just demoed came down?
Yes.
Okay, I don't,
I think she's asking if the building that you're wanting to do the treatment on, if that were to come down as
Oh.
well.
Right.
We would have the same issue for the next building. If that's the case, we're just dominoing all the way down to the end of the block till we tear down the Blue Dog. Because that's the way those were built in 100 years. We tear down another building, we got another interior wall that's now exterior till we keep going. So that's why I think we need to stop it where it's at and just,
Well, I was backing that thought up because I think if it came down, we probably would sit here for years before someone would come in, buy the lot and build a brand new building on it.
Yeah, so I've talked with Wes about this. Look, let's all be real. The situation is not ideal for anybody, right? We didn't want to have to do this. And we've already spent enough money on this project as it is. However, and I don't want to say this to open up a whole other dialogue, so I'm trying to keep it focused here. But I kind of see the optimism in the project because that was a very blighted block in downtown. It might actually have been the worst block And as unfortunate as the fire was, I think it's created a new opportunity to revive that particular block. And the cleanup is remarkable. I mean, they did a wonderful job, but it created that exposed wall that wasn't meant for the elements, and it needs some attention, because if it doesn't get the attention, we're going to be dealing with another issue. Furthermore, we learned that the taxes, the back taxes, there was concern about ownership of the lot, the empty one right now, that the taxes had been paid as part of the check that we received. Okay? So the city is going to put a lien on the property. We have an opportunity to likely own at least the empty lot there now. So I think if we do a treatment on that building and that wall, it just creates more opportunity to bring more life back to that particular block. So if we can get somebody to own this building, and then they revive it, and then they bring the next one, we've got the empty place where the Blue Dog is, and perhaps another restaurant could go in there. So, you know, yes, there's a cost, but I see the potential. Mr. Eimer?
And I'm not saying, Wes, that you're wrong in anything you're saying, but I will give you guys something to think about. I own a building in Mount Pulaski, commercial building, 2-story. They tore the 3-story building right down next to me. Now my wall, that interior wall, is my exterior wall. It's been 25 years, still standing. All they did was crush the brick, put it in the hole, fill it with dirt. I'm just telling you what's happened to me. Now they're getting ready to tear the Vinegar Hill bar down on the other side of me. It was supposed to have been down already. It's going down sometime as soon as they get the contractor set up again. So I'm back at it on the other side of me, and I'm going to have a freestanding building now. So I don't know. I have not looked at this down here. And I'm not going to question his ability, but I'm just telling you what's happened over there. That my basement is okay. But I mean, there was never mention of flowable fill or anything like that. But I'm not saying that this case is probably different. But I'm just giving you guys that my wall now is an exterior wall, and it was an interior wall. So, and they did mortar up where the floor joist things were. So it is holding. So it's something to think about.
Okay, so what would the council like to do? Place it on the
I'll
regular
put this
agenda?
on the agenda.
Okay, well, Wes, did you address the funding source for this request? How's it gonna be paid for?
This was the one that, what is the sewer, well, I'm sorry, it's the fund that we had set aside for the monies for the landscape waste facility.
Oh, the loan from the Enterprise Sewer
Correct.
Fund?
Yes, that
Okay.
obviously didn't come to total fruition, so that's how we originally decided to pay.
Okay. Okay, so place this on the regular agenda?
And the cost being, what, 48,000 or 60,000? What did you?
Not to exceed
to-
60.
right.
It puts contingency in case I run into something. Wes, do you believe that this is the last work that we're gonna need to do to this property? I know you don't have a crystal ball,
Yes, sir.
but given your construction background.
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Not that it'll give us a reassurance, but it'll make us feel better knowing we don't have to keep coming back having these conversations.
I mean, it is, it's an empty lot. But yes, with this demolition project, yes.
Okay,
I believe so.
thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 7, Fire Department Clerical. Ms. Rolfs, I believe this is your item.
You have a page in the agenda packet that has this information on it, but after our meeting last week and we were talking about clerical help, our fire chief was asked the question and he said, well, I don't have clerical help, which caused some discussion with some of us, and we also had some discussion with the fire chief also. And in the discussion, several points came up. Those are listed on the sheet that I put out. Do we want to look at somebody part-time, full-time, or use somebody that's on our current staff that could fill in to that position? In discussion, since we have never had, as far as I know, a clerical assistant at the fire department. This is a learning experience for us, it's a learning experience for the fire chief, and it definitely would be a learning experience for the clerical help that we would get. So if we have someone that would have time, and we would have to decide how much time as we look into this, that person might have to devote to working with the fire chief. Do I feel that it's needed from our discussion? Yes, I do believe the fire chief does need some clerical help over there to allow him to do some more administrative types of things than just doing clerical type things. And again, as I said, if you look at the data that I put on the sheet, these were some of the reasons that I said, and I wasn't alone. Alderman Robin also and I were discussing, and we kind of agreed that this would be a step forward in the right direction, that this was the time to do it because we're looking at the budget for next year. If we were going to have to hire someone new, if we were going to use someone that's currently here, then that would go into our budget preparation. I don't know if the fire chief would like to address this in any way, shape, or form, but I think from our, Robin and my discussion, we were just very much concerned that perhaps, not, I shouldn't say concerned, excited that we could possibly get him some help, so.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that for taking that in consideration. After the discussions last week, I did talk to Mayor Welch and his administrative assistant downstairs, and she had come up and said, you know, she would be willing to help out with any type of record keeping, clerical stuff that I would need help with. I'm obviously going to take her up on that offer. With that being said, I've been working on a proposal for a deputy chief position that would help out both sides of that. It's not ready yet. I will have it ready by the next committee meeting, and then that could be taken into consideration. I don't think that a full-time clerical person is absolutely necessary if I'm getting the help I'm been offered from downstairs, and then we create another position later. But I will have that ready for you by the next committee meeting.
Okay, so I would hope that we'd have, you know, the amount of time that we can possibly allow someone to do that, that's already got a full-time job. And it would help us create some kind of a job application. You know, what are the skills that are gonna be needed? How many hours would it be if it's part-time, full-time? And I do hope that the council will consider approving this recommendation. And I don't know if the mayor has any additional information he wants to share.
No, I think you summed it up. I mean, we talked after the economic development grant meeting, and we did have Ms. Metelko up here, and she did confirm that she has capacity to help the chief. I was also trying to be mindful, and we talked about this as well. I was trying to be mindful of the fact that I knew that the chief was already going to bring forward a recommendation for deputy chief. And rather than him ask for a deputy chief and clerical assistance, let's see if we can leverage some existing help that we have available to us, and then we'll learn more as she starts to help the fire chief out. But you know, working in the same building, I think is going to be a benefit as well. And I know she's already worked with the chief on a number of other things, so I think it's a good idea, and I would support it.
So,
Ms. McClellan?
I was just going to say that from everything I've seen, Chief likes to operate in excellence, and I'd like to give him the tools to really do what he'd like to do with the fire department and make it top of the line. So.
Agreed.
So basically, what we're saying is, since we have someone in-house already that's willing to step in, we don't need to consider putting that out for an additional job. We'll wait until we've done this for a while? Or do we need to do something to make Ashley part-time here and part-time there?
Well, I think it's much like Miss Hutchison's role. She wears 3 different hats, right? Mm-hmm. She helps Peggy, she helps Walt, and she helps Wes as well. And I think that given the fact that Ashley's already on staff full-time, and I think we should give it a try and see. And if we start to see that the demands of the fire department start to exceed her capacity and impact her ability to do the things for the council and the mayor, bring it back and have another discussion. But rather than jump right in and budget for another part-time person, I think we should try it for a while and see how that goes. Mr. Parrott, did you have something?
Yeah, just a quick question. So, in my capacity at my work at the state board, I've come to find out that the fire department, they're to schedule visits to the public schools, or to all schools actually, right? Is that something that you schedule, or who schedules that, and would the assistant help you in doing that?
So scheduling schools in particular is done by our inspectors. We have 3 inspectors. They set all the stuff up for our school stuff. Scheduling other things, though, I do that all myself, and there is a lot to be scheduled. So, yeah, she could definitely be a benefit, assisting me with the scheduling of things as well. So,
All right, thank you.
you're welcome. Thank you.
So, Mr. Reimer.
Just a quick question. And if Ashley was helping you, what do you think? 10, 15, 20 hours a week out of her? What do you think would be?
As we start this process, I have to go through what's basically considered sensitive information on the personnel files, EMS records, things like that can't be shared. So I'm thinking if you wanted a number of hours per week, 5 to 10 to start. I mean, it wouldn't be a whole lot. It would just be more taking some of the record keeping of, rig maintenance or gear maintenance, because we have to keep records on everything. And it's very, very time consuming to do that. So like I said, it's a learning experience for everybody. So we're just going to start out kind of easy and see what we can do. But she was, she openly said, I'll be more than happy to help.
That's in line with, I was thinking 25%, so you're right in that ballpark. Okay. So given that, then thank you for bringing this forward. I don't think we need to vote on anything at this time. We'll just get Ms. Metalko engaged with the fire chief, and then we'll monitor how that's going. We'll come back and report to the council on that. Okay. Okay, next up is item number 8, solar ordinance. Mr. Bateman.
So I'm bringing this back around. First thing, Mr. Woodhall does his job excellent. Never done anything wrong. He follows the rules by the T. But being the council representing the city, we all know how we had to have a special meeting. I think it was down at the police station on the big solar farm on the big curve. And then unbeknownst to the council, because that's not the way our ordinance is written, then there's another fairly large solar farm behind the Illini building out by Walmart, which then started the phone calls again of, most people called them eyesores. So that being said, I would like the council to revisit the solar ordinance that we have in place, and briefly spoke with John, very briefly. I'm usually brief when I'm speaking to John. That we should maybe change the wording to where some kind of governing body, or maybe even just this council, would approve any ground-mounted solar arrays. The reason I'm saying this, and hopefully there's not somebody already thinking it, and I don't put a thought in their head, so maybe we can vote on this in the next week. There is a lot of farmland along Woodlawn Road that the last regional planning meeting that I went to as a representative from the city for the county, the solar people are offering extremely good money per acre instead of farming. And the fear from the constituents I've talked to and myself is these people that own this property are looking at nothing but dollar signs, and I just trying to stop that from happening. So I would like the council to change up the wording to where a ground-mounted solar array, whether it be in a private yard or a larger field like that, should have some kind of approval from a governing body instead of Wes doing his job and just looking at it and say, yes, it meets the ordinance, it's approved. So like I said, he did nothing wrong. It's just, you know, we have these things pop up, and that's when we learn we need to change some things. I'm open for whatever kind of wording, or I personally would like to see council approval. We're elected by the people. We represent the people. We would have a better idea of what the citizens could reach out and say, I really don't want that in my backyard, or I don't want to drive by it, or that's, you know, whatever, instead of having a small group like a ZBA. I know when I was on the county board, it went to the ZBA, and then the ZBA gave a recommendation, and the county votes on the approval. So all I'm asking for is ground-mounted solar at that point, so that way there is more eyes on looking at those things instead of it just filling the landscape, and then we're stuck with it.
Alderman Barrett.
So if it was at the council's vote, what would the discussion be? Basically, we have constituents that don't want that, constituents that live in that area. Why don't we just ban it total? We don't even have to have the discussions, because they're all eyesores, right? I don't think a lot of people like them unless, you know, they don't even look good on the houses. I would just go for no more ground installed, you know, solar panels anywhere in the city limits.
Ms. Ross.
With your discussions, would any of that property be good for having more businesses built out there? I mean, to me, if we want to see our community grow, we may have to look at trying to entice businesses to come to Lincoln. And would that be an area where those businesses would work best? I don't know for sure what property you're talking
One
about.
citizen told me, they said, well, that would have been a good place for another 2 or 3 shops, you know, next to Walmart instead of ground-mounted solar. Well, we got a lot of shopping areas that are empty now, but you always got to look at the future. And I agree with Mr. Parrott. They're not the most pleasant things to look at. You know, I drive by one of the largest ones on I-55 every day. So, you know, that being said, we also have to consider the city is in the process of building another 20 acres of solar on our floodplain down by the sewer plant. So we, you know, kind of looking ourselves in the mirror there. That's outside toward to the city limits. I'll be honest. Everybody, you know, there's a lot of farmland between here and out by the highway, and I don't want to see that lined with solar panels. You know, that'd kind of turn the whole gaming flags in a different direction if you drive in and we're looking at solar panels no matter what direction you enter the city from. I think, you know, instead of banning them totally, that they should come forward, and, you know, that way the city can decide, you know, what's best for the residents in that area, or what's best in the city as a whole.
Alderman Downs and Alderman Eimer.
I might be in the minority here. I don't think ground-mounted solar panels are an eyesore. I feel like if somebody wants to have some in their backyard, I don't have any in my backyard, but if somebody wanted some, I feel like that's their business, and it's not really our place to tell them what they can and can't do in that regard. I don't know specifically the areas that you're referencing. But so I don't really know how I feel about this one way or another. I need to learn more. Maybe you can show me where these proposed sites are going to be. So I guess that's really all I wanted to say. It just feels like a bit of a reach for me, so I don't really know how I feel on that.
Alderman Eimer.
Kevin, I believe you're talking about as you go out Woodlawn, it's all there past West Lincoln's Zion School and all that on the right, correct? I'm not against solar, but I will agree with him on that. I will never vote for that to be solar panels. We need business.
all.
That would be a terrible eyesore going from there on out to Cracker Barrel. So out farther is one thing. Down there by the sewage plant, I mean, that's swamp ground. I mean, that's out of the way. I don't mind that. But I would never vote yes for them to go there at all, so.
Mr. Woodhull?
Yeah, headed west on Woodlawn, a lot of that property is county, especially on the north side of the road. It's just kind of spotty here and there. Regardless, the ordinance as it stands right now, 412.3 it's anything under a half acre footprint is anything over a half acre footprint is a special use permit requirement through the planning commission, which would then come back to you for approval. So anything like larger than the one that's out that you're speaking of by Walmart is going to go through a special use permit process, which is simply a recommendation to the to the council from the plan commission. And those special use permits, we do all the legwork for that. So that's a lot of sending it out to neighboring properties. It's a public meeting. You know, anybody with any concerns come and speak their piece, yay, nay. They take that into consideration, and then you all do the same. So that's currently in there as it stands.
What is the size of the one by Walmart?
That's under a quarter acre. It's about
Quarter?
19,000. So,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, a half acre. I apologize. 43,560. So 21,780 is a half, and that's about 19,000.
Okay. Got Mr. Downs, Mr. Bateman, then Ms. Rolfs.
Okay, just for clarification on what you said there, Wes, anything larger than a half an acre would have to go to the planning commission and then come to us anyways?
Anything through the planning commission, whether they approve or disapprove, is simply a recommendation to the council. So this is a special use permit.
So anything larger than half an acre would still have to
Basically, if
come to
you're
us
looking
anyway.
at the one that we're speaking of right now, anything larger than that, y'all would have,
Okay.
it would come to you first, or lastly, I suppose.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Bateman?
That being said, that's still big. To me, it's still too big. I mean, it's the entire field behind Illini Bank, tall, wide. That, to me, that's still an eyesore inside the city limits. You know, obviously the one out by Dollar General, that's, how many acres is that one? That's
Almost 40,
Yeah.
35.
so, you know.
I'll have to go by and
that's-
take looks again, 'cause I didn't think it was that bad, but I don't really pay
I just-
too much attention. I'll
I
have to
would
go look and see.
appreciate if the council would consider making ground-mounted solar a council vote permit. That way we can get the input from the citizens from either the neighboring area or traffic flow or what it's gonna look like. I know that at the last regional planning meeting, I think, and Mr. Glenn may know about it because they've already talked about the county, that they're looking at large solar farms around the windmills now. So pretty soon from Google Earth will look like a giant mirror with fans on top of it. But, you know, I spent many years voting for renewable energy, but I didn't think it would just explode like it did. So I'm just saying inside the city that I was born and raised in and grew up in, I think we should have a better discussion on what other citizens have to look at when they're driving by. And the one behind Illini Bank, if that's under that acreage, it's pretty big solar.
Ms. Rolfs?
Wes, how is that zoned? Is that commercial? Is it industrial? Is it,
The one behind the bank, I think it's C2.
most of the land out there, how is that?
I believe it's C2.
It's what?
C2.
Commercial. Mr. Parrott?
So I remember a conversation about solar, and when we discussed, and I think it was out at the police department, right? As we discussed it, all the planning that goes into place, and I like what Kevin's saying about a sale, and they're doing all the work, and then it comes to the council, and we say, no, they did all that work. And I think that was the case for over there too. You know, like, well, it's there's nothing against it. We almost have to approve this. Isn't it too late by then if they're doing all the work? Or how do we work around that then?
On that one, we did not have a solar ordinance at that point. So Wes did his job. I think that's industrial out there, right? So it met all the criteria for industrial that did not have any provisions on it to come before the council to vote on it. We just had a discussion because of the backlash of what was going on. So I'm saying any new projects, they would plan it, submit their plans to Wes. If they spent money ahead of time, that's their problem if they're already buying the equipment. And then Wes would say, well, this is ground mounted solar. It needs to go in front of the council for
Yeah, as
approval.
long as they know ahead of time that this could be voted no.
I had a discussion, or excuse me, sorry. I had
Go
a
ahead, Mr. Wilfell.
discussion mid last week with someone interested in a good sized property and just said, how do we move forward? Or they were looking at buying the property. And I gave them all the information I just told you guys. And it's a lot of work. I mean, it's just the planning commission's a month plus long process, and that's just the time frames of things in the newspaper, the mailings, the postings, all the certified everything. That's a lot of work, just that, but that doesn't go into account everything that they have to provide. Decommissioning plans, actual plans. It's a lot of work. So it's, I guess we've had several projects where people go through the design phase. Drawings of any size, they could be $10,000-$20,000. Okay, well, we can't afford the property or the project. Okay, the $5 million project just went away, but so did the 20 grand. I would say it's price of doing business, I suppose, but anybody who does their due diligence isn't going to just go buy a bunch of property and go, well, I hope I can do this. I hope they don't.
Ms. McClellan?
I have really had a lot of pushback from citizens about solar farms, so I agree with Mr. Bateman that either what they say is, I didn't know it was coming in, so I didn't have a chance to protest or anything. And so I think a lot of people were surprised by the one on the curve. And I do think it would be good just talk through that process at least of what can we do to either let people know that it's coming and let them be able to share what they really feel about it, or let us have final say.
Mr. Hoblet and Mr. Eimer?
Mr. Woodhall, I know with the zoning board of appeals that there was notices sent out to neighboring homeowners for the variances that are requested. And you do get, when you have those respective hearings, that people do show up to address their concerns. I don't believe that's the case with the planning commission. Is that?
It's the same.
It's the same?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure that if we're going to be putting something, let's say if the county does in the ZBA, and we're going to put in the planning commission.
I'll certainly double check, but yes, that is precisely the case. It's the same as far as the 15 to 30 day
Right.
notifications, paper. It's a public
Paper.
meeting, of course.
Yep.
The radius of certified mailings that go out, that's just a courtesy to the people in that radius. So nearby all property owners, not just residential.
And then within these respective areas, because these notices go out to the neighboring homeowners, are they a good avenue for those people to come and
Yeah,
address their
absolutely.
concerns?
Absolutely. I'd say, especially when you get those in the mail, they'll call and say, what is this about? We'll explain it to them. We'll send them the packet. They're usually pretty lengthy, so we'll send that to them if they request, explain what it is, and then they have a chance to voice their opinion.
And you provide said recommendation to the council, and they render their decision thereafter. Okay.
Mr. Eimer, Mr. Downs, and Ms. McClellan?
I'm not against solar, but I don't think we need any more solar in the city limits, period, as far as farms. Out on the edge of town or whatever is one thing. We don't even benefit anything from this solar. It's getting shipped everywhere else. We need business. We need buildings and business and housing, and that's what we need in this town. no more solar. I voted yes for that one on Lemon Street. I didn't realize it was gonna, I'll be honest, it's pretty ugly. I don't like it now. I'm disappointed. I really am. And I don't want to see any more of that in the city limits. So that's my opinion. I mean, I'm not against solar. I think solar and wind is good, but at least if we could get something out of it. We're not get. Now we will down on by the sewage plant, right? We're going to. Isn't that going to benefit our city buildings?
The current one that's
Yeah.
there helps offset the cost of operating the wastewater
That's
treatment
great.
plant, and then the one that is coming behind it is a community solar farm, and that will benefit the residents of Lincoln.
That's what we need. We need something to benefit. But the one on Limit, correct me if I'm wrong, that's not benefiting us at all. Is that right?
It's a private entity
See?
that owns it.
And I'm kind of sorry I went that direction, but what's done is done. You know, we all make mistakes, but yeah, I just don't. If it's not going to benefit us as a town, and I'm like Kevin, born and raised here also. I don't know if we need to put something in writing to stop this or send a signal that no more in the city limits. If it's definitely not going to benefit us.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these green projects really are being driven by the fact that they get these really steep tax incentives for doing so. And if they can sell off that energy, it doesn't necessarily come here. I mean, the way we understand it, the one on Limit Street is going to be used to operate businesses that may be out in those buildings that are out there. Going back to the Limit Street project, there was the mindset that, well, it's better than an open grassy field that's not maintained. And so it's half in one hand, half in another. It depends on your perspective, right? Mr. Downs.
I was just looking for a compromise. So it sounds like our current ordinance is if there's a solar farm that's over half an acre, it needs to come to a special committee and then come to us. Anyways, what if we just reduce the size to like a quarter acre or something else?
Just say anything outside of residential.
Anything outside? Yeah, okay. That
I
would
mean,
be
any.
fine too.
You
There's
can't build them in
there's
residential,
Very
right?
few lots that are going to be nearly close to that large in town, anyways. There's one ground-mounted residential project in town. It's been done for quite a while.
You can do ground-mounted projects in residential areas.
Mm-hmm.
And that one that's out there, if that's a quarter acre, we've all talked about selling we actually have sold property to people on vacant lots next to houses. So there's a possibility of a solar farm popping up between houses in a
Well, that's
residential
the
neighborhood,
footprint
then, right?
of that's the footprint of the array, not the. So that's a lot. That's a big footprint.
Somebody could take an empty lot and do that?
Well, that's why I asked him if you could do it in residential.
No, we need to stop that. I'm not for that at all. Not in town. That, no.
So,
Ms. McClellan.
I just had two things. If we're going to, first of all, there was a lot of pushback to the one, I think, in out Fifth Street. I think people, there was a couple votes on that, and they ended up saying yes to that, but there was a lot of pushback to that one, and I think people have pretty strong feelings about that. And I don't know if we need to hear what people are saying or maybe take the pulse a little bit about what people in the city really think. But the other thing is that if we're going to do that, if we're going to limit it, then we have to have some criteria where it says, well, it doesn't meet this, it doesn't meet this, or it doesn't. Whether it's just beautification or whether it's whatever it is, I think we need to have some kind of criteria where we can judge everything by the same criteria or something like that. So that would probably have to be written maybe by our lawyer too.
Yep. Mr. Hoblet.
So right now with the ground mounted, there are certain height restrictions, and you can make those a little bit more, restrictive if you think there's a problem there. I will note that the ground mounted units that go, like say, in someone's backyard, are not as they're short. They're squat to the ground, as I understand it. And they don't go as tall as like the ones you see out on Limit Street. There is provisions regarding community solar gardens, and that's where, like say, a series of homeowners, like say if there's an empty lot, like you're mentioning here, homeowners could like say the homeowners around that empty lot could pull the money together and put those smaller solar panels, as I understand it, in there to benefit themselves. Again, these are all provisions that you guys can restrict, eliminate as you see fit within this city code. So, I will note that the roof mounted ones were going in way before we put in anything within our city code regulating these. So you just got to define as you see fit. I do represent other communities, and when approached about solar, they did decide to just not allow any commercial solar farms within their respective communities. Others have allowed them, and they have been approached by solar farms, commercial solar farms, because they typically find the regulations of the cities or the municipalities to be less restrictive than they do of the counties. So there's something to be said about that. But again, it's your guys' purview. But I will note that the ones that are currently there now are clearly, obviously, as you guys are aware, grandfathered in.
Mr. Bateman.
So some of the suggestions of the citizens that reached out to me are, for instance, the one on Lemon Street. People say, well, they agreed with the comment. It's better than the empty grass that was there that the guy mowed once or twice a year. But it would have been nice if they put a decorative fence along Lemon Street so that the solar's there, but they don't have to look at it. Okay. Or the exact same thing was brought up about the one at the Illini building. Hey, I pull into the Walmart parking lot. It'd have been nice if they were forced to put up some kind of decorative fence or wall so you don't see it there. No different than what we spent a year with the Lakes Association people, allowing them to plant bushes and shrubs on their portion of the property so they don't have to look at it. So those are some of the things that I think the council needs to consider. Instead of an outright ban, just make it a conditional use type thing to where I've said on those zoning meetings where a big one was the fly ash mound at Elkhart when the mine was expanding. To get the approval, they had to meet certain fencing, greenery, shrubs. Everybody knows it's a fly ash pile on the other side, but at least when you're driving down the country roads, it looks like a nice hillside. Those are the kind of things I think that should be considered, is the aesthetics of something like that, especially inside the city limits. So I'm not in favor of an outright ban, but I am in favor of making it more of a conversation of what's it going to look like in the end, who's it going to benefit, where's it going, what's the possibility of expansion in that area, those kind of things. So that's why I think ground-mounted solar needs to be a much larger discussion instead of yes it fits the zoning requirements and this is the approval. So again, West did nothing wrong. It's all new to us and we're learning as we go.
Ms. McClellan.
Just when we talked about fencing at that meeting at the police department, there was some kind of ecological, it has to be open because of the rabbits or something. Do you remember that, Wes, that conversation? And I don't know if that was some kind of regulation or that was just something that.
No, it wasn't.
So we can require them to have that without running into anybody's statute about wildlife or.
Part of the larger commercial ones over, I want to say over 5 acres, they have to do a DNR study with regards to animal and native, greenery type stuff. So I don't know if that would inhibit or help that specifically. But I would say that I have the mic. The Planning Commission, when they look into their special use permit, if you look at the actual code, section 11, 2 or 4, I believe, their parameters of approving or recommending to you guys to approve or deny it is based on neighboring properties, Is it a detriment? Does it cause traffic problems? You know, same when we do a drive-through. You know, they take into account the stacking, this and that, but part of their approval process, they do have a certain amount of, like I said, is it a detriment to the properties? Is it financially detrimental? Is it ugly? You know, those sort of things are what they look into before making a recommendation to the council.
But only, that is just a recommendation.
Correct. That the final decision is yours.
Mr. Bateman.
If the council so approves, as long as Wes doesn't tell us tonight he's got one he's getting ready to stamp approval on, we can put this on the next cow, and I can work with John, which I'm sure he's gonna love, with some wording, maybe look up some other communities on some kind of wording on again, I would vote no on an outright ban, but I wanna be more selective on what we approve and disapprove, based on the citizens and long-term visions for the city. Maybe have something by the next cow or something.
Mr. Hoblet, did you have something?
I was just curious for that one that's going outside of Walmart. Is that a commercial, large scale farm?
No.
It's done.
Yeah, it's complete.
Okay.
But no, it's not considered commercial.
It was power for their building.
Correct.
Okay. I was just looking for the acreage.
And that's a $450,000 project.
Understood. I was just looking at
That's
that
a good investment, you know.
because I was looking here that we do have fencing requirements for, like, say, the large scale commercial farms, but I don't believe we don't for any of the other ones. So that might be an avenue to pursue and research as well.
Wes, do we have any pending applications?
No.
Okay.
The comment I made earlier was I told them what they needed to do, and I haven't heard back, but that was less than a week ago. So if they were even going to do that, it'd take a lot longer to get that put together. In the meantime, it'd probably make sense to reach out and say, hey, so you're aware, the ordinance I've already provided you might change. Whether they submit anything or not, that doesn't mean it has to go through the approval process, or, you know, that it gets approved based on your decisions.
I was going to recommend that we take a pause on accepting applications until they work out this ordinance.
As of right now, I have none. I've had one discussion in the last 8 months, 6
Okay.
months probably.
All right.
The one I'm speaking of right now.
Okay. So Mr. Bateman and Mr. Hobble will work together, bring a recommendation back to the council at the next CAL. If that changes, please let the clerk know.
Is the council okay with not an outright ban, just language on changing the section for ground-mounted solar arrays?
Maybe.
Write it up that way, and then we'll go from there. Yep. Okay. Okay, next item up is item number 9, discussion non-union employees' pay. Mr. Bateman, this has been your topic. Did you want to start?
Well, again, trying to get this hashed out before budget time talks. Honestly, I'm hoping we get it hashed out in the next couple cows. I haven't had a lot of feedback from some of the council members, but what I have had, I've worked on some, and the mayor put together a proposal on his own that, in theory, that I look at, looks very promising. I do think it's fair. I think there's some tweaking that needs to go on, but if any of you have had the chance to look at it, it is a fairly straightforward. It would help us in budgeting processes, stop some of my arguing, which I know everybody looks forward to during budget time all the time. But I think these people deserve a clarity in how their pay is handled, instead of every single year not knowing what's going on. So I'll turn that over to Mayor, and he can hit his high points on that. And like, again, it looked good.
Has everybody had a chance to look at the document that I sent out? Okay. So I'll run down through this real quick and then open it up for questions. So I wrote up this, what's called an annual salary increase policy for non-union employees. There's a purpose statement in the beginning, a compensation philosophy. These are pretty standard. So that's where that was withdrawn from. But of more importance is some things that I think we need to take care of moving forward. And this is based on discussions for the past at least 2 to 3 years where we have a difference of opinion on how we should address this topic. The first is a performance review. I think we need to implement a performance evaluation process for all of our employees, quite honestly. I think that the evaluation process gives the individual employee some perspective into their performance, whether they're excelling or they have areas of improvement. I also think the performance evaluation can play into the department heads and allow them a tool to work with their employees. And then it also plays into the salary increase portion I'm going to discuss here, where it gives them the tool they need to make a determination about what they feel is an appropriate salary increase, if any. I feel that we needed to have a starting point, because this has been talked about quite extensively over the past couple of years about, where do we start? Is it 1,400? Is it 1,600? And we always end up in kind of a heated or spirited debate about that. I think it's time that, huh? Okay, I'll go with spirited. But I felt that we needed to start with a standard, and so I started with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index takes a lot of things into consideration: the cost of food, housing, utilities, fuel, all the things that we have to pay for as residents and people, right? So I went out to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they publish monthly updates, but they also publish the past 12 months. So currently right now it's at 3.2%. That's what the CPI is. That could change. It's all based on the economy. Ms. Rolfe sent an email to me today, and thank you for sending that. I looked, and there are some regional numbers as well we can look at. And I bring that up to say that the regional CPI is somewhere around 2.7 for the Springfield area.
I've got that here.
And so the council can decide where we fall on it. But either way, I think we need to start with the CPI and then add in a what I'm calling a plus 2% on here. It could be 1, it could be 2, 3, whatever the council decides. But the reason why I say we need to add the additional percentage in is because the CPI is the bare cost of living increase, right? And if we only issue a CPI to our employees, I mean, that still is better than nothing, right? But also, one of the recommendations in here is to turn part of this process over to the department heads, because there's been at least an appetite from some council members to get the council or the department heads involved. If we give them an additional percentage, whether it's 1 or 2, that then gives them the funding to make decisions based on their employees' performance. If we all start at CPI and they've got 4 employees, you're going to have to take away from one employee to give to another. And I don't think we should drop below the CPI. I think that if we do, we run the risk of going right back to where we were and the problems we were trying to solve over the past few years. Then future councils get caught up in we got to give them big increases to catch them up. So that's why I recommend that. Again, that percentage can be whatever the council decides, but I'm just throwing that out there as a proposal. Also, there is discussion and has been, and I spoke with the city attorney about it, about city council approval. So my recommendation is based on the council focusing on budget line items, and let's get away from talking about specific employees. I don't think that the employees appreciate it, and I think sometimes we get into conversations that go a little off track, And so I think it's best if we stick to the line items that our employees are paid out of. So I've also provided everybody a document that's just a rough spreadsheet of what that looks like. And the CPI plus 2, I'll call it for the sake of this argument, would go against each of these line items. So you as the council, your job would be to determine what if it's CPI regional, CPI national, and what additional percentage. Lock it into this policy. It is then the responsibility of the department heads to then take the additional funds that are provided to them through their budgeted line items and have the performance evaluation discussions and the merit increase discussions, and they start dealing directly with their employees. They know their employees better. They know their performance. They know how they're operating on behalf of the city, good or bad. And so I think we need to empower them. We've entrusted them to run multi-million-dollar departments, and I think that they're more than capable of doing that for us. One of the other things that came up, and I talked with department heads today about it, was this idea of a compensation study. I know Mr. Parrott's brought this up in the past. We've talked about this, right? I don't know that we need to do it now. The recommendation in here is to start next year, but I think it might benefit the city if we had a compensation study done, take a look at our job descriptions, help us set some salary ranges for employees, like the starting and ending, because I know a cap has been a discussion that's been brought up. And so I think they could help us fill in some of the gaps and clean up our process a little bit by doing a compensation study. I also think that the range, another benefit to the range is there was discussion in council about where do we start new employees, right? Say we have an employee that leaves, what do we start the new employee at? If we have a range, we'll know kind of the bottom of what the range is, and then the department head can make a decision as to what their budget allows and where they feel they need to start the employee based on, you know, their resume, their backgrounds, their skills, et cetera, training perhaps. So I think all of this plays into this idea that, you know, we really want to retain our valued employees. We want to be able to attract new employees as well. I also think that it empowers the department head. It lets us get back to doing the other things we need to do and focus more on the budget. But I don't want the council to think that they don't have a say in it. In the past, you know, we've done these resolutions that lists every department or every position in person, and then that's where we start talking about percentages. We didn't do that last year, and I don't think we need to do it again this year. The council still has final say in the funding of these line items simply by passing appropriations. So in budget and appropriation discussions, we can still talk about the funding for these line items, but I think that moves us in the right direction, and quite honestly, I think it helps future councils and mayors not fall into the pitfalls that we have in the past. So, sorry that was long-winded, but I wanted to give you my thoughts on it and explain this process. Okay, thoughts? Mr. Bateman, and then Ms. O'Donohue.
So since the CPI fluctuates, one thing I thought of after my discussion with Mr. Welch this afternoon was maybe it would benefit the council if we put a cap, as in, you know, if the final wording says CPI plus 2%, what if all of a sudden the CPI is 4.8? You know, maybe may say not to exceed 5%. The line item, the salary line item cannot exceed 5%. Then that way the department heads would know they can increase their salary line item up to 5%. To divvy out the money as said. And then this may be pulled out as a secondary discussion, but there's also been discussion of job security. The problem with that is being elected officials and department heads that are appointed by the mayor, those people that work under him are at the will of that person. And maybe the council should have a discussion to see if we can draft up some kind of language for instance, if Joe was replaced as the department head, the two girls that work there, he could just walk in and say, okay, I'm bringing in my own people, or the clerk's office the same way. I know Miss Bateman, when she was sworn in, she kept, it was two people stayed, the rest of them left with Susan, and she's hired people, but they're younger people. So every single year when there's an election cycle, they're sitting there worrying about their job also. So I don't know if that can change, or maybe that's a separate discussion, but that has been brought
Yeah,
up.
let me interject there. So I did have a discussion with the department heads about this today, and there are some discrepancies, and the city attorney was there as well. And there are some discrepancies in the ordinances. They're not consistent. I've got some recommended changes. I think that they need to be made for the betterment of, quite honestly, the employees, first of all, and second of all, for the departments and the department heads. For instance, I'll tell you that there are some positions that are within departments that are at the advising or the recommendation of the mayor to the council. I shouldn't be making recommendations as a mayor for employees within another department. I think that's up to the department heads to do that. There's also some language to your reference about the terms, and some of those positions run concurrent with the term of their department head. I think that there are some ways that we can modify that to clean up some of that language and instead ensure the employees that they don't have to worry about having a job every 4 years, right? That's part of what we're trying to solve here is, fair competitive wages for really hardworking employees, but we also want them to not be concerned periodically about whether they're going to have a job or not when an election happens. So, but if you wouldn't mind, can we bring that back up at another time? And because I think that's going to take some recommendation of the city attorney on some changes, and that could turn into a little bit of another conversation. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can pull that out, but I just wanted
Yeah.
people to be aware that there's more than just salary increases for these people that they're concerned about. And we just heard someone who works for a firm, you've heard me say it many a time, trying to keep good employees nowadays. I would have never thought it would be this tough. So when we have good employees, we want to make sure we keep them. And it's just a better flow. So we can pull that out, but I don't want to kick it down the road forever. So if we can get the compensation worked out, then we can start that discussion next.
Okay. Mr. Hoblet and I'll work on that. I've already got input from the department heads on that as well. Oh, Ms. McClellan. I'm sorry, Ms. O'Donohue, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did, go ahead.
Okay, Ms. McClellan and then Ms. O'Donohue.
Okay, well, just to kind of change it back just a minute to the CPI that we're talking about capping. But then the discussion of who will have the discussion about the percentage that we're going to add to that? If we're going to make it 1%, 2%, or 3%, or who's?
I think that the council needs to make that decision, and then we put it in the policy. And the CPI, if you want to put a cap on the CPI, that's actually a great idea. And then we'll review the policy periodically, and that can be changed at the will of the council moving forward. Mr. Hoblet, keep me honest. We talked about that today too, right?
Yes, we did. It'll take some research and some work on the ordinances. Mayor, as you did indicate, the ordinances are a bit outdated. You just take a perusal over, Title I, which is where most of these fall under, and provisions are a bit antiquated. They need to be updated, and they will be updated in accordance with the council's wishes, because now we have a perfect opportunity to do as such. We brought forth this recommendation. It turns out there's it brings to light certain issues within that respective tile that need to be addressed. So,
Ms. McClellan?
It seems like a really clean way to do it, like you talked about not having to have the discussion all the time. But that 1%, 2%, or 3% is not going to be floating. We're going to say we're going to go 2% and it's gonna stay at that? Or is that gonna be a floating number that could change every year, or?
My recommendation is to lock it in, but I also was thinking earlier when others were talking, and you bring up a good point. Just because the council gives the department heads this additional 2% does not mean that the department heads need to spend it. Just like they don't spend everything in their line items already, it just gives them the flexibility they need to give adequate salary increases based on the tools that we've provided. And I told them that today. I don't expect you to, just because your salary line item increases, to burn it all just because you've been given it. Treat it the same way you do everything else within your department. Ms. O'Donoghue?
I think for me, it's the first time in 2 years that we've had this conversation that there's actually something promising. Like having a policy, I think it's important not only for us, it's important for the employees to know year to year what their raises are going to look like, what our policy truly is. And for me, the second most important thing is that it should go back to the department heads to do this. We don't know what these people do every day, day in and day out. Joe knows, and Mrs. Bateman knows, Walt knows. These people know what their employees do, and that's where the raises should be coming from. It should not be coming from this council. So for me, this is huge.
Mr. Conzo?
Well, first of all, I agree with everything that Alderwoman O'Donoghue just said regarding the input from the department heads as the best way to do that. I guess needed some points clarification on this, make sure that I understood this correctly. So you would take whatever the annual CPI that we get from IDOR, whatever that is.
I got it from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but
Okay.
if IDOR is a more definitive source, we can certainly reference that.
I think it is because it's, specific to Illinois.
And whichever source, I'm sorry to cut you off, whatever source we choose, I think it needs to be locked into the policy so that there's no confusion. Because even Ms. Rolfs and I talking in an email today, we were coming up with different sources about this, so you can find different numbers depending on where you're looking.
And then you would take, add to that, say, the CPI plus up to 3%. So it's conceivable somebody would get a 5%. If the CPI were 2.5%, somebody could get as much as 7.5% if you like.
No,
I would not vote for that. I want to cap it at 5%.
5% total or 5% over and above the
CPI plus 2 or a max of 5.
not to exceed 5.
So
if
the
the
CP
CPI is 1.3 and you add 2 to it, then it's 3.3. Then that's what the salary line item would be. But when I was on the phone with Mr. Welch, I looked up the average Illinois CPI, which is 3.7%.
That's
You add
IDOR,
2, that's now 5.7. So I'm saying CPI plus 2 or a max at 5.
Okay, so if the CPI, that plus 2 would be the same every year it would be plus 2?
It's fixed.
Unless
it exceeds 5.
it maxes to 5, which is the same as other contracts we have in the city.
You may want to consider, because the CPI may be low some years, and there may be employees that, these are essentially merit compensation jobs. Increasing that'd be my recommendation, but you guys are going to do what you want to do.
When you say increase, are you talking about the increase of the max of 5%?
Increasing the max of 5% and making that 2%, maybe as much as 3%. So you give the department head some additional flexibility. Well, you would go above 5, depending on what the CPI is. So CPI can be, 5%. You don't want to go to 8% in a case like that, probably. But
I would ask this: can we at least start with something, and then monitor it, and then see if we need to make an adjustment come next year?
you can do that. That's
And
up
keep
to
in
you.
mind that the plus percentage is meant to be a fixed percentage because the CPI does fluctuate. It's really to ensure that nobody falls backwards. We don't have employees that are falling backwards because we know how painful it was to try to catch them up, right? It's not easy to,
Have the discussion each year, if, God forbid, the CPI is 0.5%.
It's 0.5?
do you want to talk?
Yeah.
If it was 0.5%, then yes, that's a very low increase in wages. But at least we've got, like Mrs. O'Donohue said, we've got something voted on, and we're only making one decision at that point, Chuck. What are we going? Are we going CPI plus, or is the CPI so low we need to change it this
I
year?
see.
Ms. Rolfs,
And wait, one more question.
Mr. Conzo.
If you don't mind. You have here on your timeline, the activity schedule, treasurer determines increases for budget salary. I don't think that's what you want me to do based on this conversation.
No, I'll be honest, I didn't spend a lot of time on that portion, but the intent was that the treasurer and then the two appointed aldermen on the budget committee don't need to come back to this body. You've referenced the policy, and based on the policy, you adjust the budget accordingly. That's what the intent was. So if we need to modify that to say the budget committee, we can do that as well.
The budget committee would be making a recommendation to the full council.
Based on the policy,
Right.
yes. Just like you go talk with myself, you talk with department heads about what the anticipated increases will be, the policy will give you the information you need to determine the salary increases for the departments.
I would push that down further. I think February 1st is a bit early. We're certainly not going to make it this year.
What do you recommend?
I would go with March 1st because generally in March is when we get the adequate information to do the revenue projections.
Well, you're in luck. I modified the document already, and it says, and it has changed. Here, can you show?
No, I believe you. You don't have
Hold
to
that to
show it.
Mr.
I mean, Mr.
No, go
Conzo,
ahead
it
and
sounds
look at
like
it.
we're close to a vote.
Yes.
So I don't think March 1st is out of the question. I think that timeline is fine.
I wanted to give them adequate time to move along in the budget process the way that they should be and have in the past. And I think that those dates also, the March 1st date on that schedule, set a deadline for the completion of performance reviews as well, so that the department heads, they can start them January 1st if they want, but we need them to be completed by March 1st.
Does the council like this document, other than the
Hold up.
percentage? Do you want to put it on the next voting
Hold up.
session? Or
There's a couple of council members that want to speak. Mr. Reimer and Mr. Parrott would like to speak. Ms. Rolfs, and then Mr. Reimer and Mr. Parrott.
When I was looking at some of this research, it said, and I think when we look at this, we look at Lincoln, but we also want to look at where would our population be drawn to if we were too low. And it would be probably Springfield, Bloomington, because of the transportation type thing. People aren't going to drive 2 hours to get to a job. It said the cost of living in Springfield, Illinois is a minus 0.41% lower than the national average. So if we just look at our state capital and look at what it has said about that, when we look at what percentage we're going to come to, I think it's important that we do consider all avenues. In Springfield, it had, where I was looking up, it had a 2.7 CPI. And I know, and Tracy and I talked about this, that he had the 3.2%. So again, if we look at our employees and we're trying to attract them, if we can say that we are at, something that's a little bit lower than Springfield, that's good for us. That's a positive thing. I wasn't sure what the exact rule or regulation, or if there was, on the 2% additional. I didn't find any. That is just a determination that we can make. There's no standard for what that has to be.
Correct. I didn't reference anything when I came up with that. And I mentioned it earlier, but to reiterate, I added that in there because I wanted to give the department heads some room within their budget if they felt an employee was exceeding expectations and they wanted to give them additional monies. I wanted to make sure they could do that without impacting other employees. And that's very important for the departments that have multiple employees, because if we only give them enough to cover CPI, then let's say you've got one employee meeting expectations and another that just knocked it out of the park this year and had a special project. I don't think it would be fair to this employee who still met expectations to reduce below CPI for them. So by keeping it at CPI plus 1 or 2 or whatever the council decides, you give them that flexibility, and I think it's fair to the other employees,
Well, if,
to all employees.
if we don't have a set one, such as what they've recommended what I've read, is the 2% above that, that we would want to make sure it's clear in our language that that amount is left up to the department heads to fluctuate as they need to.
I think I referenced it in that document,
So
but
I think that would have to be clear
Yep.
in what we're looking at. So I agree, I think we're looking at, do we go with a 3.2 or do we go with the 2.7? I personally like this a lot and looked at that and looked at some of those figures. And I'd like to see it done with the 2.7 and the 3.2 to see what the difference in the salary would be, which I can do. You don't have to
I'll just do it for you.
Oh, okay.
It's like I was a mind reader. So if you did a 2.7 and there was no additional,
Oh,
it would result in a budget increase of 30,000. Keep in mind, this covers 17 employees because the department heads are included in this conversation as well, because they're also paid out of these line items. 2.7 plus 1 is 42,000. 2.7 plus 2 is 53,000. Then the next one is 64,000. I only went up to plus 3 because I didn't feel that it would be a good idea to go above that. The 3.2 at 0 is 36,000. So you've got about a $5,684 difference. 3.2 plus 1 is 47. 3.2 plus 2 is 59. 3.2 plus 3 is 70. And the same difference, the $5,684 would be the same. But
did you send that to us already?
I actually did this today because I went down another rabbit hole. You can give that to Ms. Rolfs. But please, thank you. But also the idea is that we don't lock in that CPI. It fluctuates. Right. So the council, I think, should say we will use the CPI based on the Illinois Department of Revenue's statistics and data. Yeah, yearly, every year.
I was going to suggest we use what I referenced to you was the Illinois CPI, because unfortunately, when you take just Springfield, the average income in Springfield is higher because it's the state capital. There's a lot of state employees. You have to figure in Chicago, East St. Louis, Peoria, where if you take the Illinois average CPI, you're encompassing the entire state.
Okay. I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. Mr. Reimer, you had your hand up, and then Mr. Parrott.
I guess my question's directed to Chuck. I mean, am I understanding right that some of these employees could be getting as much as a 5% raise, right? Is that
Would
That would
based
be
on
the cap.
based on what has been proposed, that would be the maximum.
can we afford all that?
I think so, given the number of employees at this point in time. Now, the economy varies considerably from year to year, and if you look back to, say, this council in 2008, and I was not in this position in 2008. I came along a couple of years, about 2 years after that. But we were in 2009, especially. We were in a very bad recession, and by the time I got here, we were still in it. But we were really. It was tight, and we could not afford to have done that at that point. At this point, I think things are starting to go in the right direction, and I think we can. But that's why you have to reassess that on an annual basis, because you could be in that situation again. When I worked for the state, there were years we didn't get any raise.
So we're not locking in to where it's set.
Where it's never, yeah.
Yeah, because if the economy tanks,
Yeah, like next year's conversation, it would be, okay, we've seen how this worked for a year. Do we believe the +2 is still appropriate? If not, the council can adjust it. But beyond, and then that would be a policy modification. Then that would be it with the council until budget and appropriations comes in. After that, again, the line items increase and it goes to the department heads. Can Mr. Parrott go first and then you, Chief? I'm sorry, Mr. Emery, were you done? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Parrott.
So just for some perspective here, so you have a new person start off, let's say at their first year, and that annual salary was $36,000. That's basically $18 per hour. At a 5% increase each year, let's just say, over a 27-year period, their salary is going to be $128,004.
Well, keep in mind, this can be
Now, I'm
adjusted.
just putting it out there, and that's if they started at 36,000 at year one. So, what we'll need to have, and I like the idea of the departments doing it. We would need job descriptions. They would need to have their evaluations. We would need to have a recommended start salary, and then a top out salary as well too, because we can't, to Mr. Eimer's point, we can't afford. I mean, I know Chuck said we can afford 11, maybe only 11 employees, but it's not a $128,000 job.
What I would say is keep in mind the 5%, the max. I don't think it's a bad idea. If the council isn't comfortable with that, they can lower that amount. You can set it to wherever you want. But to your other point, that's why I believe that we need to do the compensation study to give a range for a particular role. And I think what you'll find is over time, if we periodically do a compensation study, recommendation in the documents every 5 years, it could be different. But that range is, as the economy changes over years, that range is going to float also, right? But what it also does is, to your point, the starting salary, well, if the bottom of the range is 32,000 based on, the market and what we've been told, perhaps a department head starts them at 33 or 34 if their qualifications meet that. If somebody's in like the 75 percentile of that range, well, then you need to, as a department head, be thinking about that as well from your budget perspective and your employees' perspective as well. So you're absolutely right. And I think if you guys tighten up those boundaries a little bit, we can get to where we need to be. Mr. Parrott, were you done?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. Ms. Rolfs?
Just had one clarification.
Yes.
When you talk about the 5%,
I'm sorry, Chief.
I'm sorry.
No, that was my fault.
When you
Yes.
talk about the 5%, is that the CPI plus the 2?
Yes. No greater. So if
So this
CPI
year
is
we had
2.5,
We had 5.2 on this, right?
it was just that was
Okay.
that document that I gave you was the CPI of 3.2, which was what I found on Department of Labor and Statistics. That was their 3.2 plus 2%, which is 5.2.
Okay.
So if you have a CPI of for example, 2.5, and then you guys have set that additional at 2, the max they'll get is 4.5, right? But Mr. Bateman's recommendation earlier was, well, let's say that the CPI is 4.5 and we've added an additional 2. Well, you can't go to 6.5 because you've only set a maximum of 5%. So it gives you flexibility. And again, this can all be modified, but at least it's a good start on a policy. Yeah. Should.
Well, without a disaster.
So
If
we
we
can
have
all-
a disaster, we may have to look at something different.
Chief Meister?
So I have two comments to make. Really responses, one to Mr. Parrott's point and the other to Mr. Eimer's question, relative to the cost that the city will incur through salary raises. One, I think we all have to remember, you brought up over a long period of time, a person may make quite a bit of money. 19 years ago, just shy of 19 years ago, when I started as a police officer, my salary was $10.50 an hour, $21,500 a year. I'm sure that you all have similar stories about your experience in the workforce, and that's just the way the world works. The price of everything goes up. I haven't seen it go down yet, so I don't think that's something that we can expect to change in the future. And then to Mr. Eimer's question, the cost to the city. One thing that hasn't been mentioned in these meetings regarding this subject is the money that we haven't spent. So many of our departments have been short-staffed for a very long time. The police department, about 5 years that we were anywhere between 1 and 5 employees completely off the books. So you're talking about I think, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, $70,000 was the total cost for all 17 employees to enjoy the highest raise possible.
On the high end, yes, that's
Right.
correct, Chief.
One full-time police officer costs the city about $90,000 when you talk about salary, benefits, and insurance. So that money has not been expended for quite some time. It's a different salary line, right? But it's still all city money.
Realize, appreciate Mr. Parrott's starting salaries and stuff. As of January 1 in Illinois, minimum wage is $32,000 plus. So when we're talking employees making 40, that's been here for several years, and skilled employees. So just please bear in mind the minimum, a warehouse worker, just trying to get them to show up to work every day, that employee in Illinois is going to make 32,000 plus. So, we can talk about how much money we're spending, but we're still not overspending either to get good quality employees.
Well, and to that point, again, we talked in the department head meeting today, but we talk about the employees as well. Well, some of our long-term employees and department heads as well, they've done comp studies that I think they've shared with the council in past years. And in their fields, they're also below what the market is as well. It's not the fault of anybody, in my opinion. It's a reality of the times that we live in. It's a reality of the fact that we have to be fiscally responsible with the money that we have and make sure that the dollars that taxpayers are giving us is spent well and goes as far as possible. And I think we've done a good job. I do. I think that one of my hopes if the council were to adopt this policy and move forward is that we can all on this council and future councils get back to focusing on other things and trust our department heads to take this charge on our behalf. Let's give them the tools they need and let them do it. But also I think it's important to get back to what I said in the beginning of this. We have some confidence and trust rebuilding we have to do with our employees. The last few years haven't been our best years, and I think I'll just put it in that manner. I think this is a good start, and I hope that we can move forward and rebuild some of that as we go forward. But I just appreciate the council at least entertaining this idea. And if you find value, let's talk about how to implement it within some responsible parameters.
Can you put together some kind of quasi-final draft to get out to the council? So we can look at over the next 2 weeks so that the next cow we're actually talking, narrowing it down to where we're getting ready to vote, because we will be into February
So
at that point. And if Chuck's, desperate for a March 1st because, he's a busy man.
So then we'll go at the treasurer's recommendation. Then let's go with IDOR. Okay. Does the council want +2?
+2.
Not
My
to exceed?
recommendation is IDR +2, max at 5.
Max of 5. Okay. Was there any other changes in the policy as presented that you'd like to see made?
When you talk about the compensation study, how do we want to go forward with that if we're looking at it?
I
What are
I
your-
think we need to have another conversation about that. And I can bring that back in another cow here in the near future. And the reason I say that is because that will cost money. Okay. And Mr. Parrott knows, I think it was $7,000 last time.
Yeah, they are
So
expensive.
there is a cost to doing that, but I think the benefit will outweigh the cost. But we just have to determine what we're comfortable doing. There's also was discussion about, can our department heads take up this charge and go to the surrounding communities and the places that they're very familiar with and bring back a comp study. I think there's benefits to both, but I think the benefit to hiring like a GovHR for a comp study is that, number one, they're versed in that. That's their expertise, and they know the sources to go to. But number two, it also gives our department heads time back in their schedule to do other things. Not that this isn't important, it's extremely important. But I mean, like, for instance, we've got a chief of police that goes out and does patrols because he's short-staffed and things of that nature. And, you know, other things happen. Every department's extremely busy. Walt, when things happen on the streets, Walt's out on weekends with his crew. So I think I think there's a benefit to doing that, but I just want to figure out what the council is comfortable with when it comes to that, because it's an expense.
It is an expense. I mean, just talking simply about getting somebody to help in the fire department. You know, we're looking at how can we save the money, have somebody else do it, not add that extra IMRF and this, that, and the other with that. But at some point, we do have to seriously look at, and hopefully things are calming down. But I did hear on the street, you know, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know about that's happening out there on the street. And at some time, I'm afraid I'm going to look at Joe, and Joe's going to say, it's time, I need 5 new people.
He'll tell you that right now.
That was time long ago.
Yeah. And so where are we with that? That
With
point?
getting him 5 new people? Well,
Trying to find 5, but can't find 5 people.
they've got new hire processes that they go through, and I have no doubt that both him and the fire chief will
But
bring
we do
those
have the money
forward.
to cover them. I
They-
think that's what we have.
They've got
to-
money in their budgets that they haven't spent because they're working through finding new hires.
Okay.
So, yeah, and there's training expenses and everything goes up. So that is a priority, I know, for them, and I know that the council finds that to be important too. Ms. McClellan?
You said, is there anything else that we might need to add? I was wondering, when does the CPI come out? Is that like
A January usually.
okay, so do we need to write that in? We're gonna use the January CPI?
Well, it only comes out once a year,
Okay.
so, but it's generally
Okay.
released in January.
And then as,
I'm sorry.
okay, that's good. And then as the budget committee, we're gonna know in time to say, look, it's 1.5. We need to take that to the council in order to we can talk about it okay.
Yeah, I believe that CPI is already out.
It may be, I haven't looked for it, because generally what I've mostly used it for has to do with the property tax, so.
We're gonna have to really look at it as a budget committee in January, and if it's gonna have
Well-
to be voted on to change it we'll need 2 meetings or.
Yeah, and it may be out there already, but yes, we would need to, it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Yeah, so those of you on the budget committee, in your committee meetings, this is one of the tasks, is to look at the CPI, find out what it is, calculate the increase to line items, and then the council, when we all come back together and have budget hearings, that's when we'll discuss, as the treasurer and you guys go, you ladies and men, go down the budget, we can explain what the increase was to it. Mr. Reimer?
Now, this is for non-union employees, correct?
And to be clear, non-union, non-contractual.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we gonna use this format for union employees?
No, because unions already have
Are
it
we
baked
gonna
in.
get them on the same?
There is,
guy or not? I'm
there
just
is,
asking.
that is something to be discussed in contract negotiations, but we have not even discussed that.
I mean, when they come up are we gonna try to get everybody in the same guideline?
I can tell you that was not the intention of this policy.
I just,
The intention of this policy was to move us forward in a more clear approach. What happens in the future when next year when we talk about contract negotiations, we'll enter into those negotiations with the departments and have conversations. So
didn't know if it was gonna expand to all employees or not.
No, the only thing that I could, to your point, the only thing that I could see expanding to all employees, and again, I discussed this today with the department heads, is performance reviews. I know that some of the departments are already doing them, but all departments should be doing them. That's my direction to the department heads and myself. And those of you on the council, we have an employee that reports to us. I'm going to be asking you to do an evaluation on that employee as well. So something to look forward to, and that'll be here in the near future. So we've got it. That's one of the things that we'll have to work on. I'd like a standardized format for that, but it has to be based on roles. I have a format that we've used in the past that I think could still be used, and we'll move forward with that. And then if we do the compensation study and they make a recommendation for improvements, we can do that as well, if the council decides that that's worth doing. Okay, I will make these changes. I will run it by the attorney, and then we'll bring it back at a committee of the whole. Thank you for having this discussion. I do appreciate it. Okay, that brings us down to announcements. Mr. Landers, you got one about the landscape waste facility?
Yes, the landscape waste facility will be open Wednesday, tomorrow, 8 to 3:50, Saturday, 8 to 3:50, and then we'll be closing down for the rest of the winter until spring cleanup starts.
That'll make my husband really happy.
When will that be, Walt?
Generally, it's mid-March. We'll open back up when the weather starts breaking. Another note, we did get the landscape attendant building set today, finally.
Awesome.
So it's in place. Just still have a lot of work to do it. Basically, the structure's sitting there. So we still have to do the inside work and get the heating and cooling and electrical stuff all done.
And the fence is
It
up?
is in place.
And the fence is up?
Yes, the fence along the road is up, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for that update. All right, does anybody else have an announcement that they'd like to make? Ms. Bateman?
It's not actually an announcement. Lori went on about her firm closing and then she's opening up one of her own. Is this, Chuck and I would like to continue with Lori. I don't know if that's something that council has to vote on. It would be her different company name. I did believe, didn't she say she would honor the price? Because the council had already approved, was it like 3-year? She had put a 3-year fee out
Yes.
there and she would honor that
Same.
price. So I didn't know if we could just go ahead and tell her go for it, or if you guys needed to vote on it.
I think probably just they'd have to approve the contract, but that wouldn't be any different. There's no contract.
If
Does she have her-
if she's honoring the
Right,
same
right.
fee, I mean,
Is her company, well,
name
is
change.
Name change.
her
yeah.
company already established?
Yeah.
Her new one?
Yeah.
Then
So
she
different
can,
name.
then she can draft up an agreement under her new company letterhead and present it to the council.
Yeah, but the cost will be the same, and she's got the materials that she's had to do their other products.
Okay, Mr. Parrott?
I would just recommend it when she drafts it up, make it just a 3-year rather than just continuing on the same cycle.
Mr. Bateman?
I would suggest a 4-year, because of the 2 people that have to work with her the longest, they would be starting their 4 years.
That's good. I like it. I like
It's a suggestion, you don't wanna go into your last year with somebody new.
it. No.
Well, I think she said she was in for another 6 years.
Yeah.
There you go.
She's my age, so she's in for
Tell
another
her
6
to-
years.
tell her 4 years.
Well, let's not go that far.
Okay,
Ask her for 4 years.
yeah. Okay, we'll bring it 4-year forward, and if the council changes their thoughts on that, we can change it. Mr. Landers, did you have one more thing?
I think Robin was before
Ms.
me.
McClellan, floor is yours.
I just wanted to say thank you to our 2 department heads who were just told she just said you guys did an awesome job, so thank you very much. Made her job easy, so.
Well, they were always good to work for, or work with, rather, I'm sorry. Yeah. They had to dummy it down sometime because they were talking over our head.
Just a few times.
Mr. Landers?
Just wanted to give a little update on Fifth Street Road,
Okay.
between State and College. There was a water main break right at right at State Street almost. So the road's been closed down since Sunday. I went by there this morning. Apparently, when they did the work, there was a couple fiber lines that were hit. The CTI fiber was there yesterday doing some repairs. I went by there this morning. There wasn't any work taking place. I know that the contractor responsible for the repairs did call in to locate yesterday afternoon. So I did see something where someone was there was mention of them putting some concrete in the hole. I don't know if that was flowable and they still have to do the surface repair yet, but I'm just guessing, I'm assuming that's going to be shut down probably for the rest of the week. Hopefully if they get the concrete surface repair done, then they'll have to let that sit and cure for a few days before they can open it back up to traffic.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Eimer?
Just real quick, it's a new year. Are we still going to keep focused on the fire and police pension too, and trying to? There was a discussion last year about trying to fund it. Now we're going to keep after that. I was just quick, just mentioning that.
I just talked to Mr. Conzo the other day briefly about that, but Mr. Conzo, do you want to?
Yeah, and we've got some actuarial studies that for each pension done by two separate companies, and we'll bring those forward too, probably in the early stages of the time we're talking about the budget, so that we can focus on that
Go
too.
after it and
Yeah,
plan.
try to move toward it. Yes, try to develop a plan. Exactly.
We need to do something.
Yep. Okay, any other announcements? Okay, if there's no other announcements, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Alderman Downs made the motion, Alderman Sanders second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? This meeting is adjourned at 8:13 PM.